So if you're one of the few people who read my article discussing my experience studying the Cree language at First Nations University of Canada, FNU, if you're one of the people who read that article, then you already know my experience inside that university was very bad. But that is not the answer to the question, why did I stop studying Cree as a language? The amazing thing about the Algonquian languages is the diversity and the territory they cover. The furthest language to the west is Yurok out in California. The Algonquian languages went all the way east to the eastern seaboard, the east coast of Canada, and what's now New York City, before the British killed everyone there who could speak the language. The indigenous language spoken in what's now Manhattan is indeed an Algonquian language. So this covered, in a complex map, a tremendous diversity of terrain and encompassed a tremendous diversity of languages and dialects. So the opportunity to work on Algonquian languages was definitely not exclusive to First Nations University. I was over 30 years old when I wanted to make this transition in my life. And, you know, both for me personally and for these languages themselves on a bigger scale, the opportunity was very much now or never. Any research you want to do on the indigenous languages of Canada, you've got to do it now or it's going to be never. If you want to do a preservation project or an education project to stop these languages from going in danger, do it now, because in 20 years it is going to be too late. If you want to get out and interview people, elderly, retired people who can speak the language fluently or nearly fluently, you've got to do that research now. 10 years from now, they'll be dead. You know, the last fluent speakers everywhere you go are elderly people. And, you know, the average lifespan on a reservation is not what it is in the comfort of Canada's big cities. You have people living in tough conditions now who often have had incredibly tough lives from the cradle to the grave. And yeah, you can make contact with people who are fluent speakers, and you know they could die at 55. Life can be short when you've struggled with the circumstances that many of Canada's First Nations people have struggled with. Many, not all, of course. Here and there are exceptions. But you know, for sure, as everyone knows, part of the tragedy of Canada's First Nations is that life can be nasty, brutal, and short when you're an Indigenous person living in the British Empire. You know, I'm trying not to mask my emotions here. I wanted to spend the rest of my life working on these political issues that I've just been talking about. And the fact that one institution couldn't deliver on its promises was not enough to end that dream. And in many ways, it was something I had been expecting from the first day I set foot at that institution. The scandals surrounding that institution and the Canadian government's threats to shut it down, those were all in the newspapers just around the time I signed up. Although the government had just lately backed down from its threats and agreed to continue funding the university. Many of the professors had just quit. You know, like just that month, people had walked out. Maybe a couple months before. I met ex-professors, people would quit on point of principle in the midst of that scandal. And my very first day walking to the university, which was also the day I got off the airplane from Asia, you know, one of the professors I spoke to was very honest to me and said, look, you know, this is an institution in crisis. Don't have any false hopes or expectations about it. I appreciated his honesty. But for me also, the opportunity was now or never. It was urgent. I had to work hard as hell to get a new career going in those languages while I was still in my early 30s, so that I could be speaking pretty fluently by the time I got to my early 40s. That's a tremendous uphill struggle for languages that have very few people who speak them fluently and very few resources, and I was committed to doing that. On paper, what I did was I enrolled immediately as a BA student. Of course, I already have a BA, but that was so I could get into classes right away. and I was looking at a tremendous diversity of MA programs and PhD programs coast to coast, because there were university programs in Quebec, there were university programs in British Columbia connected to Algonquian languages and First Nations languages. I'm not saying any of those programs are good. Perhaps each one is a disaster in its own special way, but certainly a diversity of options and opportunity to look at. But no, the very simple reason for why that career had to end, why I had to give up on all of my ambitions, was that the opportunity had been created in the first place by my marriage, and it was ended by my marriage. When my wife decided that she wanted to quit the job that she had in Canada, the job that created the foothold financially and even geographically for me to be studying these languages and to work towards that future. When she made the decision that she wanted to quit, I felt that my role was to support her in that decision and to work for the future of my marriage, not for the future of my career or my own education. I felt that was the top priority. Now, it's very easy in hindsight to say that was the wrong decision, because today I am divorced. And again, the intellectual and emotional consequences of these decisions, they weren't just real for me. They also had a huge impact on my wife. And they were, significant contributors. Probably the single most important contributor to why we got divorced were the consequences, the fallout of the end of my career in First Nations studies. Not that I personally felt there was anything inevitable about that. But you view time a little bit differently when you think you're in a marriage that is going to last until the day you die, that's going to last until your old age. Even if you've been through 5 years that were terrible, it's easy to tell yourself, well, I have to see those 5 years as one chapter in a much longer story that's going to continue until I'm in my 80s. And, even if you've just been, breaking your own heart to try to create a new career in Canada and to try to support my wife in marriage because of the sudden requirement that I leave Asia and start a new life in Canada and start a totally new set of political and linguistic issues. It's easy to convince yourself that you have to see those 2 years as one chapter in a long story that may go on until you're past 80 years old. And even looking back, what was the alternative to supporting my wife in her decision to quit her job and leave Canada? The alternative was to get divorced at that moment. The alternative was for me to say, no, my education matters more, my career matters more, and my commitment to First Nations languages and peoples matters more than this marriage. So we're getting divorced now. I could have done that. I can honestly say that option did not enter my mind. And one of the reasons for that was very simply that I felt grateful that that opportunity had been created for me at all. This also explains why I created the YouTube channel. This YouTube channel is not to promote my career.